He can't afford the uniform, and when the teacher laughs, the whole hallway hears it. In that moment, a single dad and his little girl are humiliated in front of everyone. But then, a quiet stranger steps forward. She's not just any bystander, she's a billionaire in disguise, ready to take their side. What starts as one act of kindness explodes into a small-town storm, school politics, whispered rumors, even threats to take the child away. And when the truth about the billionaire's plan comes out, the fight for dignity will test everyone's limits. How far will they go to protect a child's future, and what hidden power can one act of defiance really unleash? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The late summer sun beat down on the polished hallway floors of Riverbend Academy as Eli Turner shifted his weight, one hand resting protectively on his daughter Zoe's shoulder. The crisp white walls and gleaming trophy cases made his carefully ironed shirt feel suddenly inadequate. "I can have the full uniform amount in 2 weeks, Mrs. Whitcomb," Eli explained quietly, maintaining eye contact with the teacher despite the dismissive tilt of her head. "I just need a short extension on the deadline." Mrs. Whitcomb glanced at the 2 PTA mothers flanking her doorway, their designer handbags and perfectly styled hair marking them as fixtures of the school's social circle. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "If you can't afford the uniform, Mr. Turner," she said with a light chuckle that scraped like sandpaper, "perhaps this isn't the right school for your situation." The words hung in the air like poison. One of the PTA mothers poorly disguised her smirk behind a manicured hand, while the other simply raised her eyebrows and checked her phone. The hallway seemed to shrink, pressing in on all sides. Eli felt Zoe's shoulder trembling beneath his palm. Looking down, he saw her eyes swimming with tears she was trying desperately to hold back. His daughter, who had spent hours carefully choosing her first-day outfit and practicing her introduction in the mirror, now stood rigid with humiliation. His wedding band felt heavy where it hung on the chain beneath his shirt. Sarah would have known exactly what to say in this moment, how to stand up to this subtle cruelty while keeping their dignity intact. But Sarah wasn't here. "Thank you for your time," Eli managed, his voice steady despite the heat rising in his chest. He turned to Zoe, bending slightly to meet her eyes. "Come on, baby, we'll figure something out." "Actually," a calm voice cut through the tension, "I'd like to help with that." A woman in a plain gray cardigan stepped forward from where she'd been standing quietly near the water fountain. Nothing about her suggested wealth or power. Her clothes were simple, her silver hair cut in a practical style, her only jewelry a modest watch. But something in her bearing commanded attention. "I'll cover Zoe's uniform," she continued, her tone matter of fact. "And I'd like to establish a fund for any other students who might need assistance." She turned to address Mrs. Whitcomb directly. "Where's the office?" Mrs. Whitcomb's smile faltered. The administration office is down the hall to the left." Without another word, the woman in the cardigan strode purposefully toward the office, her sensible shoes clicking against the tile. Eli and Zoe followed in stunned silence, leaving Mrs. Whitcomb and the PTA mothers exchanging uncertain glances behind them. In the office, the woman handled everything with quiet efficiency. "Please process this for Zoe Turner's uniform," she said, sliding a credit card across the counter. "And I'd like to set up a general uniform assistance fund. You can list the donor as C. Vale." The office assistant's fingers flew across the keyboard, printing out receipts, while another staff member gently led Zoe to take her measurements. Through the office window, Eli noticed a student in the hallway holding up a phone, probably recording the aftermath of Mrs. Whitcomb's moment of cruelty. When everything was processed, C. Vale, Charlie, as she'd quietly introduced herself, declined the office's offers of recognition or publicity. She simply collected her receipt, nodded to the staff, and headed for the exit. The brightness of the parking lot was jarring after the fluorescent lights inside. Eli quickened his pace to catch up with Charlie before she reached her car, a modest sedan that looked at least 5 years old. "Ms. Vale," he called out. She turned, her expression open but unreadable. Eli extended his hand. "I want to thank you. What you did in there." Charlie's handshake was firm and warm. "This is neighbor business, Mr. Turner," she said simply. "Not charity." She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a plain white business card. "Just in case you need anything else." The card had only a first name and local phone number printed in simple black text. Eli accepted the card, noting how the thick paper felt substantial between his fingers. Before he could say more, Zoe called out from their car where she sat in the back seat, waving excitedly. She held up the fabric swatches for her uniform fitting scheduled for that afternoon, her earlier tears replaced by cautious hope. Charlie's face softened as she waved back at Zoe. Without further ceremony, she turned and got into her car, leaving Eli standing in the parking lot, holding a simple card that somehow felt heavier than its weight. Charlie walked into the school office later that afternoon, just as the final bell rang. She wanted to ensure the Uniform Assistance Fund was properly set up and accessible. The office clerk, Mrs. Martinez, was alone at her desk, organizing end-of-day paperwork. "Oh, Ms. Vale," Mrs. Martinez smiled warmly. "The fund documentation is all set. Though," she hesitated, lowering her voice, "you should know how things work here." Charlie pulled up a chair, her expression encouraging Mrs. Martinez to continue. "The no exceptions policy, it's not always consistent." Mrs. Martinez glanced toward the principal's empty office. "Some families get more flexibility than others, if you understand my meaning." Charlie nodded slowly, making a mental note. She'd seen this pattern before, arbitrary rules that seemed to bend depending on who was asking. "Thank you for letting me know," she said quietly. The office door opened, and Eli entered with Zoe, who was now proudly carrying her newly fitted uniform in a garment bag. Charlie stood, smoothing her cardigan. "Mr. Turner, perfect timing. Could we talk for a moment?" She gestured to the chairs in the hallway. Once seated, Charlie got straight to the point. "I manage a nonprofit warehouse nearby. We're looking for weekend inventory help, paid position, flexible scheduling to work around your night shifts." Eli's posture stiffened slightly. "Ms. Vale, I appreciate what you did today, but I'm not looking for—" "Daddy," Zoe touched his arm gently, "you always help people fix their cars when they can't afford the shop. Remember Mrs. Johnson's brakes last month?" Charlie watched the interaction with careful attention, noting how Eli's expression softened at his daughter's words. "This is real work, Mr. Turner," Charlie continued. "We need someone detail-oriented, good with inventory systems. Your mechanical background would be valuable for organizing equipment donations." Eli studied her face, looking for any trace of pity. Finding none, he asked, "What's the hourly rate?" Charlie named a figure that was fair market value for skilled inventory work. "Starting this Saturday at 9 a.m., if you're available. I'll be there," Eli said firmly. "But this is a job, not a favor." "Wouldn't want it any other way," Charlie replied, handing him a business card with the warehouse address. As they stood, a woman in her mid-30s approached, carrying a stack of folders. "Mr. Turner? I'm Janelle Brooks, the school social worker. Do you have a minute?" Charlie excused herself with a small wave to Zoe, who was already showing Janelle her uniform. "You belong here, Zoe," Janelle said warmly, crouching to the girl's eye level. "I love how you've decorated your notebook with those bird drawings." Zoe beamed, pulling out her sketchbook to show more of her work. While they chatted, Janelle discreetly handed Eli a colorful flyer. "Pastor Ruth Delgado runs an amazing community center at First Grace Church," she explained. "They have everything from youth art programs to a food pantry. It's a great resource for all our families." Eli appreciated how she emphasized all our families, no assumptions, no stigma. "I volunteer there sometimes," Charlie mentioned, pausing before she left. "Pastor Ruth has a gift for bringing people together." At home that evening, Eli and Zoe sat at their small dinner table, steam rising from plates of simple spaghetti. The apartment was modest but neat, with Zoe's artwork brightening the walls. Eli carefully placed Sarah's ring on his dresser, the chain coiled beside the framed photo of their wedding day. Back at the table, they joined hands. "Thank you, Lord, for this food and for watching over our family," Eli prayed softly, "and thank you for bringing good people into our path today." "Amen," Zoe echoed, already twirling pasta onto her fork. As they ate, Eli reached over to set his phone alarm for tonight's shift. The familiar routine felt different somehow, not easier, exactly, but less lonely. He watched Zoe chattering about her uniform fitting, her eyes bright with excitement about tomorrow. Outside their window, the evening sun painted the sky in gentle pinks and oranges, a peaceful end to a day that had started with such uncertainty. Eli found himself thinking about Saturday morning, about proving himself at the warehouse job. Not for Charlie's sake, but for his own, and for Zoe's. "Tell me more about those birds you were showing, Ms. Brooks," he said, watching his daughter's face light up as she reached for her sketchbook. The night ahead would be long at the garage, but right now, in this moment with his daughter, Eli felt something he hadn't experienced in a while. Possibility. The hallway video spread quickly through Riverbend's social networks overnight. By dawn, it had found its way onto Riverbend Raw, a local gossip blog known for stirring up drama in the small community. "Teacher laughed at single dad," the headline blazed across the screen, followed by the shaky phone footage. Mrs. Whitcomb's chuckle echoed clearly in the video, followed by her dismissive comment about the school not being right for families who couldn't afford uniforms. The comments section exploded. "Who does this teacher think she is? That poor little girl's face. Wait, who was the lady in the cardigan? Someone said she paid for all the uniforms?" Principal Mark Hanlon arrived at his office early Tuesday morning, his usually pristine desk already cluttered with printed emails from concerned parents. His secretary had flagged 3 voicemails from board members. He loosened his tie slightly, feeling the pressure mounting. "This is exactly what we don't need right now," he muttered, opening his laptop. The school's reputation was everything. They'd worked hard to position Riverbend K-8 as the premier school in the district. Donors expected excellence, structure, standards. His fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard as he drafted an urgent memo. Subject: Uniform Policy Update. No exceptions, dear faculty and staff. In light of recent events, and to maintain our high standards of excellence, I am implementing immediate changes to our uniform policy enforcement. These measures protect our academic environment and ensure fairness to all families who have properly prepared for our requirements. Effective immediately. Regards, Principal Mark Hanlon. He hit send. Then forwarded a copy to the board members. Better to appear proactive than reactive. At the front desk, Mrs. Martinez frowned at the new email. She glanced at the donation receipt from yesterday, "See Vail," and something clicked. Opening a browser tab, she typed "Vail and Midwest Business" into the search bar. Her eyes widened at the results. Meanwhile, across town, anonymous call reached the Child Protective Services hotline. The caller's voice dripped with manufactured concern. "Yes, I'm worried about a student at Riverbend K-8. Zoe Turner? Her father couldn't even afford basic school supplies. I saw it on that video going around. If he can't manage uniforms, what else is he unable to provide? I just think someone should check." The CPS intake worker sighed, recognizing the thinness of the report. Still, protocol required preliminary follow-up on all calls involving minors. Back at the school, the morning's chaos was far from over. A parent lifestyle blogger, Amanda Chen, had picked up the trail from Mrs. Martinez's search. Her post went live at 10:43 a.m. Who is C. Vail? The mystery benefactor of Riverbend K-8 sources confirmed yesterday's viral uniform incident ended with an anonymous donation from someone identified only as C. Vail. But here's where it gets interesting. Could this be Charlotte Vale, the reclusive CEO of Vale Retail Solutions? The billionaire known for keeping such a low profile that most people don't even know what she looks like? Why would a billionaire be hanging around our school hallways in a cardigan? What's her connection to the Turner family? Comment below with your theories. Riverbend Mystery, who is Vale? The post spread like wildfire through local parent groups. Charlie's phone buzzed continuously with incoming notifications, but she ignored them all morning, focused on a meeting with her foundation's education initiative team. It wasn't until late afternoon that she finally checked her messages. Among them was a text from her personal assistant. Your name is trending locally. The uniform story has legs. Several news outlets requesting comment. How do you want to handle this? Charlie sat on a bench in Marshall Park, watching two children share a bag of chips nearby. One child carefully divided the remaining chips exactly in half, ensuring their friend got an equal share. The simple act of kindness made her smile, even as she felt the weight of her eroding anonymity. She typed back a brief response. No comment for now. Let's see how this plays out. Pocketing her phone, Charlie leaned back on the bench. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves, and somewhere nearby, a bird called out to its mate. She'd spent years carefully cultivating her privacy, using it as a shield to do good work without drawing attention to herself. Now that shield was cracking, the children with the chips had moved on to drawing with chalk on the sidewalk, still sharing their resources without hesitation. Their simple interaction reminded Charlie that helping others was rarely as neat and controlled as she preferred. Sometimes it got messy. Sometimes it meant being seen. She watched the sunset paint the sky in deep oranges and purples, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges. The principal's policy would go into effect. Her identity would likely be confirmed. The pressure would mount on all sides. But right now, in this moment, she simply observed the children's chalk art taking shape on the concrete, a wobbly heart with the words, "Be kind," written inside. A reporter from the Riverbend Gazette lurked near the auto shop as Eli's shift ended. The morning sun barely peeked over the horizon, casting long shadows across the nearly empty parking lot. Eli's boots crunched on loose gravel as he headed toward his truck, his mind already on getting Zoe ready for school. "Mr. Turner, a moment, please." The reporter jumped out from behind a parked car, microphone thrust forward, cameraman in tow. "Can you comment on Charlotte Vale's involvement in your situation?" Eli stopped, keys jangling in his hand. "I'm sorry, who?" "The billionaire who paid for your daughter's uniform. Charlotte Vale, CEO of Vale Retail Solutions?" The reporter pressed closer, camera light blazing in Eli's tired eyes. "Were you aware of her wealth when she approached you?" Eli's hand tightened around his keys, but his voice remained steady. "Ms. Charlie helped my daughter feel welcome at school. That's what matters. But surely finding out she's worth billions changes things? There are rumors about special treatment. Policy shouldn't shame kids." Eli cut in firmly. "That's all I have to say about it." He climbed into his truck, closed the door on further questions, and drove away. Back at Riverbend K8, Principal Hanlon paced his office, scrolling through the latest blog post on his tablet. Revealed. Mystery donor is retail billionaire Charlotte Vale B. Amanda Chen. The cardigan-wearing Good Samaritan from Monday's viral uniform incident has been identified as Charlotte Vale, the notoriously private CEO of Vale Retail Solutions. Worth an estimated $4.2 billion, Vale appeared out of nowhere to rescue a struggling single father. But questions remain. Why this family? Why now? Is this a sugar rescue or sincere charity? Sources close to the situation suggest. Hanlon buzzed his secretary. "Get Mrs. Whitcomb in here. Now." Minutes later, Mrs. Whitcomb perched stiffly on a chair across from his desk. "This needs to go away," Hanlon said, tapping the tablet. "Regain control of your classroom. Keep your head down until this blows over." Mrs. Whitcomb's spine stiffened. I maintain appropriate discipline in my classroom, Mark. Perhaps if parents properly prepared their children, just handle it, Hanlon snapped. And no more viral moments. Mrs. Whitcomb's heels clicked sharply against the floor as she left, her lips pressed into a thin line. In her classroom, she wrote the day's schedule on the board with extra force, the chalk squeaking protest. Down the hall, Janelle Brooks watched Zoe Turner through the open door of the counseling office. The girl sat hunched over her sketchbook, barely touching her morning granola bar. "Would you like to draw in here before class starts?" Janelle asked gently. "It's quiet, and I have some nice colored pencils." Zoe nodded, slipping into the comfortable chair by the window. Sunlight warmed the small space as she opened her sketchbook to a fresh page. Her pencil moved with purpose, creating delicate lines that slowly took shape. "That's beautiful," Janelle said, glimpsing the emerging drawing. "Is it a bird?" "Yes," Zoe added detail to the wing. "It's sitting on a hanger, like the uniforms in the office." The sketch showed a small sparrow, perched gracefully on a wire hanger, its feathers catching imaginary light. Before lunch, Pastor Ruth Delgado walked into the school office, a folder tucked under her arm. The secretary looked up expectantly. "I'd like to speak with Principal Hanlon about starting a uniform closet program at the church," Pastor Ruth said. "We have space, volunteers, and discretion." The secretary disappeared into Hanlon's office, returning moments later. "He can give you 5 minutes." Pastor Ruth found Hanlon typing at his computer, barely glancing up. "Pastor Delgado, I'm quite busy." "This won't take long." She laid out her proposal, a dignified system for families to access uniforms through the church, no questions asked. "We already run the food pantry successfully. This would be similar." Hanlon shrugged, still focused on his screen. "That's off-site. Not our concern. But if we partnered—" "Thank you for stopping by." His tone left no room for discussion. Pastor Ruth gathered her folder, pausing at the door. She'd expected resistance, but this felt different. Something had shifted in the school's atmosphere, like storm clouds gathering. Friday afternoon painted long shadows across the school parking lot as Eli's truck pulled into a visitor spot. Zoe clutched an envelope in her hands, practically bouncing in her seat with excitement. "You sure Ms. Charlie will be here?" she asked, smoothing the edge of the envelope for the 10th time. "Pastor Ruth said she usually helps with Friday afternoon setup," Eli replied, unbuckling his seatbelt. The church's side entrance stood open, warm light spilling onto the steps. Inside, they found Charlie arranging metal racks, her cardigan sleeves pushed up to her elbows. She turned at their footsteps, her face brightening with recognition. "The Turners!" She wiped her hands on her jeans. "What brings you by?" Zoe stepped forward, extending the envelope. "I made you something, to say thank you." Charlie accepted the envelope carefully, as if handling something precious. Inside was a hand-drawn card featuring the bird-on-hanger sketch Zoe had created in Janelle's office. The lines were delicate but confident, showing both strength and grace. "Zoe," Charlie breathed, "this is beautiful." She held the drawing closer to the light. "The way the bird perches there, it's perfect." Pastor Ruth, who had been sorting through donation forms nearby, came over to look. "Now that," she said, pointing to the sketch, "that could be our logo. If you'd let us use it, Zoe?" Zoe's eyes widened. "Really? It captures exactly what we're trying to do here," Pastor Ruth continued. "Something natural, dignified. Not charity. Belonging." Eli watched his daughter stand a little taller, pride replacing her usual shyness. "What do you think, baby girl? Want to be our official artist?" Zoe nodded enthusiastically. "Can I draw more birds? Maybe different kinds?" "As many as you want," Charlie smiled. "We'll need signs, flyers." She paused, looking at Eli. "If that's okay with your dad?" "More than okay," Eli said softly. Saturday morning arrived clear and crisp. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Eli parked outside the warehouse, its brick walls still cool in the morning shade. He'd polished his work boots and pressed his shirt, small habits from his army days that helped him feel prepared. Charlie met him at the side door, keycard in hand. "Morning," she said, no different than if he'd been any other coworker. "Coffee's on inside." Manny's already started organizing the back section. The warehouse interior stretched high overhead, metal shelving reaching toward industrial lights. Eli followed Charlie past neat rows of boxes and hanging racks to where an older man in a Vietnam veteran's cap was sorting through donations. "Manny," Charlie called out. "This is Eli Turner. Army, like you said?" "3rd Infantry Division," Eli confirmed. Manny's weathered face cracked into a grin. "Marines myself. But I won't hold the Army thing against you." He extended a calloused hand. "Welcome aboard, son." They fell into an easy rhythm, Eli's experience with logistics helping him quickly grasp the organization system. Around noon, Manny led him to a corner of the warehouse where several kids' bicycles lay in various states of disrepair. "Been meaning to get to these," Manny said, scratching his chin. "Donations from the summer drive. Good bikes underneath all the rust, but nobody here knows how to fix 'em proper." Eli crouched down, examining the nearest frame. "This one just needs new brake cables and a chain adjustment. That one," he pointed to a small purple bike, "probably needs the bearings repacked, but the frame's solid." "You know bikes?" Manny's eyebrows rose. "Used to fix them all through high school, then vehicles in the Army." Eli stood, already mentally cataloging needed parts. "I could get these running." "Charlie!" Manny called out. "Think we found our bike man." Throughout the afternoon, families began arriving quietly at the church entrance. Pastor Ruth greeted each one with the same warm smile, no matter their circumstances. Janelle sat at a small desk, professionally recording sizes and requirements as if this were any other school service. "The whole point," Pastor Ruth explained to a nervous mother, "is that every child walks into school Monday feeling confident. No one needs to know where their uniform came from." Eli caught glimpses of the operation between tasks, noting how carefully everyone preserved each family's dignity. No one rushed them. No one asked unnecessary questions. Each child left standing a little taller, just like Zoe had. By late afternoon, Eli had migrated to the bike repair corner. The familiar work of tightening bolts and adjusting gears settled something in his chest. This wasn't charity. This was what he was good at, what he could give back. The purple bike had fought him the hardest, its bearings stubborn after years of neglect. But now, at 4:40 p.m., he tightened the last bolt and stood back to admire his work. The chrome sparkled where he'd polished it, and the new brake cables responded perfectly to his test squeeze. Charlie appeared beside him, having shed her cardigan hours ago in the warehouse heat. She watched as he spun the front wheel, its motion smooth and true. "This," Eli said quietly, hands still resting on the handlebars, "feels right." Charlie nodded, understanding in her eyes. They stood together in the golden afternoon light, watching the wheel slowly come to rest. The Monday morning sun cast long shadows across the church steps as another family slipped quietly through the side door. Inside, Pastor Ruth's warm greeting echoed softly through the hall. This was the 6th uniform fitting since the closet had opened, each one handled with the same careful attention to dignity. A young boy emerged 15 minutes later, standing straighter in his new blazer. His mother whispered something to Pastor Ruth, who simply smiled and patted her hand. No computers tracked these moments. No social media announced them. Just parents sharing quiet words at pickup time, passing hope from one to another like a cherished secret. In Mrs. Whitcomb's classroom, the morning tension had eased slightly. Children who once fidgeted with ill-fitting clothes now sat more comfortably, their attention on their work rather than their appearance. Mrs. Whitcomb noticed but said nothing, her own discomfort showing only in the way she straightened papers that were already aligned. "Class," she announced as the morning attendant settled. "We're starting a new writing assignment today." She wrote compassion essay on the whiteboard in her precise handwriting. "I want you to think about what compassion means in our everyday lives." Zoe sat up straighter at her desk, pencil already moving across her notebook. Words flowed as she thought about the different kinds of uniforms people wore, not just the blazers and ties, but the invisible ones. She wrote about her father's work clothes, still carrying traces of motor oil after double shifts, about Pastor Ruth's gentle smile that never wavered, no matter who walked through her door, about the way Manny wore his veteran's cap like a badge of honor. Across town at the warehouse, Eli worked steadily through his lunch break, hands moving with practiced ease over bicycle chains and spokes. The pile of repairs had grown as word spread, each donated bike tagged with a child's name and age. Manny appeared beside him, 2 steaming cups of coffee in hand. "Taking a break, soldier?" Eli wiped his hands on a shop rag and accepted the cup gratefully. "Thanks, Manny." They settled onto some empty crates, the familiar scents of coffee and metal hanging in the air. Manny gestured to the bike Eli had been working on. "Reminds me of my unit's mechanic in Da Nang. Could fix anything with 2 wires and determination. Our motor pool sergeant was like that." Eli nodded, sipping his coffee. "Taught me everything I know about troubleshooting under pressure." "Different war, same spirit," Manny replied. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 men who understood the weight of service and the satisfaction of working with their hands. Meanwhile, in the school office, Charlie reviewed the paperwork for the Natural History Museum field trip. The permission slips had been ready for weeks, but the funding had fallen through. She wrote a check, requesting only that it be logged as an anonymous parent donation. Janelle, organizing the chaperone list, looked up. "You know, we're still short 1 volunteer." "I couldn't," Charlie started. "You could," Janelle insisted, sliding the sign-up sheet across the desk. "Just another parent helping out. The kids already know you as Ms. Charlie, anyway." After a moment's hesitation, Charlie added her name to the list. The afternoon sun was setting when Eli finally pulled into his apartment complex. He carried a newly labeled bike into the storage room, EH8, written in careful letters on its tag. Upstairs, he found Zoe at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers covered in her neat handwriting. "Daddy, can I read you my essay?" "Let me wash up first, baby girl." He scrubbed the day's grease from his hands, then settled into a kitchen chair. "Okay, let's hear it." Zoe cleared her throat and began reading. "Some uniforms you can see, like the ones we wear to school, but the most important uniforms are invisible. They're made of the things people carry inside them." Her words painted pictures of courage worn like armor, of kindness stitched into everyday moments. She described how her father wore his wedding ring on a chain, a uniform of love and memory. How Mrs. Whitcomb's stern face sometimes softened when she thought no one was looking. When she finished reading, Eli sat quietly for a moment, touched by his daughter's perception. "That's beautiful, Zoe. Want to put your bird logo up on the fridge?" She nodded eagerly, retrieving the sketch from her folder. Together, they used alphabet magnets to secure it in place, the simple drawing somehow making their kitchen feel more like home. "You know what I think?" Eli said, studying the bird's graceful lines. "I think you've got your mama's eye for seeing the good in people." Zoe smiled, tracing the bird's wing with her finger. "She would have liked helping at the closet, wouldn't she?" "She sure would." Eli adjusted the drawing slightly, making sure it hung straight. "Now, how about some dinner while you tell me more about this field trip coming up?" The yellow school bus wound its way through downtown Riverbend toward the Natural History Museum. Zoe pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching buildings slide past. Her sketchbook rested on her lap, already open to a fresh page. Inside the museum's grand hall, their class gathered around a towering display of preserved birds. Sunlight streamed through high windows, catching the iridescent feathers of mounted hummingbirds and the proud chest of a red-tailed hawk. "Look at how the light hits their wings," Charlie said softly, standing beside Zoe. She pointed to a particularly striking blue jay specimen. The way the colors change depending on the angle, that must be challenging to capture in a drawing. Zoe's pencil moved across her paper with careful strokes. I like how each feather is different, she replied, not looking up. Like fingerprints. Charlie leaned in to study the sketch. You've really caught the way it holds its head. Are you interested in other kinds of art too? Before Zoe could answer, Madison, a girl who had snickered at her old clothes last week, approached hesitantly. Could I maybe borrow a pencil? Mine broke. Zoe paused, then reached into her bag and pulled out her spare. Here, she said, holding it out. It's my good one, so. I'll be super careful, Madison promised. She lingered, watching Zoe work. That's really good. Could you show me how you do the feathers like that? The two girls bent over the sketchbook together, Zoe demonstrating her technique while Charlie stepped back, smiling quietly at the exchange. At lunchtime, the class spilled onto the museum's lawn. Children sprawled on the grass, trading sandwich halves and stories about their favorite exhibits. Under a maple tree, Mrs. Whitcomb unwrapped her own lunch, still keeping watch over her students. A mother approached another parent sitting nearby, holding a carefully folded uniform skirt. Thank you again for lending this, she said softly. I washed it twice to make sure it was perfect. The other parent waved away the thanks. Of course, we all help where we can. Mrs. Whitcomb's hands stilled on her sandwich. The exchange sent her mind spinning back 30 years, to a school hallway where she stood in scuffed sneakers while other girls showed off their new saddle shoes. Her mother's voice echoing, "We'll get the right ones when the electric bill is paid." The memory hit her with unexpected force. She watched the two mothers chat easily now, no hint of shame or superiority between them, just parents helping parents. The knot that had lived in her chest since the uniform incident began to loosen, just slightly. The afternoon wound down, and the class loaded back onto the bus. A small boy in the back began sniffling, homesickness clearly setting in after the long day. Charlie, who had been checking attendance with the teacher, noticed and slid into the seat beside him. "Long day, huh?" she said gently. The boy nodded, wiping his nose with his sleeve. Charlie began humming softly, an old lullaby her father used to sing. Other children nearby grew quiet, listening. "My mom sings that too," a girl across the aisle said. "Ms. Charlie, do you know any other songs?" Another child called out. Soon the whole back of the bus was joining in on "You Are My Sunshine," the boy's tears forgotten as he sang along. Even Miss Whitcomb, in the front seat, found herself smiling at the impromptu chorus. The late afternoon sun painted the school parking lot golden as the bus pulled up to the curb. Parents waited in a scattered line, some checking watches, others chatting in small groups. Children tumbled out, full of stories about dinosaur bones and gemstone displays. Zoe bounded down the steps and ran straight to Janelle, who was finishing up her workday. "Look what I drew." She thrust her sketchbook forward, pages fluttering. Janelle caught the book carefully, studying the detailed bird sketches. "These are wonderful, Zoe. You've really captured their personalities." Mrs. Whitcomb, checking off students as they left, paused beside them. She glanced at the drawings, and something in her face softened. "That's beautiful," she said, offering Zoe a genuine smile, the first real one since school began. Zoe hugged her sketchbook to her chest, a tiny grin tugging at her lips as she watched her teacher move away to help another student find their parent. The school auditorium hummed with excitement as families filed in for the fall assembly. Fluorescent lights gleamed off fresh haircuts and pressed uniforms. Parents juggled coffee cups and phone cameras, saving seats with jackets and purses. Eli Turner slipped into a back row, still wearing his mechanic's uniform from the abbreviated shift he'd arranged to attend. The familiar scent of motor oil clung faintly to his hands despite scrubbing them clean. He spotted Zoe sitting with her class, fidgeting with the corner of her sketchbook. Charlie Vale sat quietly in the middle section, her plain cardigan helping her blend in with the other attendees. She'd declined the offered seat on the stage, preferring to remain just another community member. Principal Hanlon stepped to the podium, tapping the microphone. "Welcome to our fall community celebration," he announced, his voice carrying forced cheerfulness. "We have much to recognize today." The usual presentations began: honor roll certificates, attendance awards, sports achievements. Parents clapped dutifully, children shuffled forward to receive their acknowledgments. Then Janelle Brooks took the microphone, her warm smile genuine. "We have a special announcement regarding our new community partnership," she began. "The Uniform Closet program needed a logo that captured its spirit of dignity and hope. We received many wonderful submissions, but one stood out." Zoe's head snapped up, her eyes widening. "The winning design," Janelle continued, "comes from Zoe Turner. Her bird logo perfectly symbolizes how we lift each other up. Zoe, would you please come forward?" The audience erupted in applause. Zoe stood slowly, disbelief written across her face. Her classmates patted her back as she made her way to the aisle. Eli straightened in his seat, throat tight with emotion. He watched his daughter climb the steps to the stage, her back straight despite her nervousness. Janelle pinned a blue ribbon to Zoe's uniform and held up an enlarged version of the sketch. A graceful bird perched on a clothes hanger, wings slightly spread as if preparing to take flight. "This logo will represent our partnership on all community materials," she announced. The applause grew louder. Several parents stood. Zoe's smile bloomed, shy but real. When she returned to her seat, Eli reached across the aisle to squeeze her shoulder. "You earned this," he whispered fiercely. Pride radiated from his entire being. Charlie dabbed discreetly at her eyes with a tissue, staying in her seat but beaming with quiet joy. She watched Zoe accept congratulations from her classmates, noting how the girl's usual guardedness had softened. Mrs. Whitcomb approached the podium next, holding a paper with slightly trembling hands. "One of our students wrote this poem about kindness," she began. Her voice carried clearly through the hall as she read, "We wear our hearts like badges, our hope like pressed seams. What we carry is our uniform, more than what it seems." Her voice wavered slightly on that line. She paused, swallowed hard, then continued reading. The words seemed to affect her more deeply than anyone had expected. The assembly concluded with more applause and the usual chaos of families gathering their belongings. The positive energy lasted through the afternoon, carrying everyone home on a wave of community pride. But at 7:42 that evening, everything changed. Eli's phone buzzed with a news alert from the local blog that had been following the story. His stomach dropped as he read the headline, "Exposed. Principal's Secret Donor Gala Plans Feature Charitable Case Study." The article contained screenshots of an email from Principal Hanlon to the school board. In it, he proposed hosting an exclusive fundraising gala where they would highlight their charitable case study, a clear reference to Zoe, though she wasn't named directly, to attract wealthy donors. The email praised the marketing opportunity of their heartwarming story. Eli's hands shook as he scrolled through the article. The comment section was already filling up. "Classic grifter move, playing for sympathy. Billionaire's publicity stunt. Why should my kids have to accommodate their problems?" The words burned like acid. Everything pure about the day's celebration felt suddenly tainted. At 9:15 p.m., his phone buzzed again. An email from Mrs. Whitcomb appeared. "Dear Mr. Turner, due to the current disruption surrounding recent events, we feel it would be best if Zoe takes a break from class on Monday until these matters can be properly sorted. This will give everyone time to refocus on academics. Regards." Mrs. Whitcomb. Eli stared at his phone screen in his quiet living room, the blue light harsh against the gathering darkness. The wound of public humiliation, which had just begun to heal, ripped open anew. His daughter's moment of triumph had lasted less than 12 hours before being twisted into something ugly. The phone's display dimmed, then went black, reflecting his own tired face back at him. Down the hall, Zoe slept peacefully, her prize ribbon hanging on her bedpost, unaware that her Monday would bring only more pain. The wooden pews of Pastor Ruth's church creaked under shifting weight as the Sunday morning congregation settled in. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting colored patterns across worn hymnals. Eli Turner sat in the last row, his work-roughened hands folded in his lap. Beside him, Zoe hunched over her sketchbook, her pencil moving in quick, nervous strokes. Pastor Ruth stood at the pulpit, her silver hair catching the light. Her voice carried clear and strong through the hushed sanctuary. "Today, we reflect on standing with the small," she began. "In times of trouble, we must ask ourselves, do we turn away, or do we stand firm with those who need us most?" Eli felt the weight of eyes occasionally turning his way, though most tried to be discreet. News of the leaked email and blog posts had spread quickly through their small community. He kept his gaze fixed forward, shoulders straight, the same posture that had carried him through difficult missions overseas. In her sketchbook, Zoe's pencil created two birds, their backs turned to each other. The larger bird's wing stretched protectively over the smaller one. She added careful details to their feathers, losing herself in the familiar comfort of drawing. After the final hymn, as people filed out into the mild autumn morning, Manny approached Eli. The older veteran's face was set with determination, his military bearing evident despite his civilian clothes. "Turner," Manny said quietly, gripping Eli's shoulder, "things get ugly, you've got backup. Some folks forget what service means after they take off the uniform." "Not me." His gruff voice carried absolute certainty. Eli nodded, grateful for the support but unable to find words past the tightness in his throat. The next morning arrived with a sharp knock at 10:00 a.m. Eli, who had been reviewing job applications for the bike repair program, opened the door to find a professionally dressed woman holding a clipboard. "Mr. Turner, I'm Ms. Alvarez from Child Protective Services. We received a report that requires a home visit. May I come in?" Eli's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. "Of course." He stepped back, gesturing to the living room. "Please, have a seat." Ms. Alvarez moved through the apartment with practiced efficiency. Her dark eyes took in every detail, the neat stack of completed homework on the kitchen table, the carefully labeled leftovers in the fridge, the organized closet with Zoe's uniforms hung properly. "Could you walk me through your typical daily schedule?" she asked, making notes. Eli explained his night shift at the auto shop, the morning routine with Zoe, his new weekend work at the warehouse. He pulled out pay stubs from both jobs, Zoe's perfect attendance record, and a folder of her recent schoolwork. "I see you maintain a dedicated homework area," Ms. Alvarez observed, noting the small desk in the corner of the living room. It held Zoe's textbooks, a cup of sharpened pencils, and a framed photo of Eli's late wife. A knock at the door interrupted them. Pastor Ruth entered, followed by Janelle Brooks, both carrying folders. She handed over letters detailing Eli's involvement with the church and community programs. Janelle added her own report. "As the school social worker, I can confirm that Zoe is thriving academically and socially. She has regular medical checkups, participates in class, and shows no signs of neglect." Ms. Alvarez reviewed the materials carefully. "Mr. Turner, I want to be transparent. We're required to investigate all reports, even anonymous ones. However, I'm seeing evidence of a stable, nurturing home environment." She made several notes. "I'll schedule a follow-up visit as procedure requires, but I have no immediate concerns." After she left, Eli sank onto the couch, exhausted. Pastor Ruth squeezed his shoulder. "You're doing right by your girl, Eli. Don't let anyone tell you different." Later that afternoon, Eli pulled into the school parking lot, his jaw set with determination. The office air conditioning hit him as he entered, making the back of his neck prickle. "I need to speak with Principal Hanlon," he said quietly to the receptionist. "About why my daughter was told to take a break from class." Principal Hanlon emerged from his office, his tie perfectly straight, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Mr. Turner, please come in." Inside the office, Hanlon settled behind his desk like a man arranging armor. We felt it best to pause until the current distraction dies down. "Distraction?" Eli's voice remained level, though his hands clenched at his sides. "My daughter won an art contest. She's doing well in class. The only distraction is the one you created with that gala email. Now, Mr. Turner, we have to consider the entire school community. My child is not your PR problem." Eli stood, drawing himself to his full height. The words came out firm and clear, carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked out, leaving Hanlon with his mouth still open. The afternoon sun hit Eli's face as he exited the building. His steps were steady as he walked to his car, determination replacing the morning's anxiety. Behind him, the school's brick walls seemed to loom a little less tall than before. Janelle Brooks sat in her office, sunlight streaming through the window onto scattered files and a half-empty coffee mug. Across from her desk, Mrs. Whitcomb perched stiffly in a chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I laughed because—" Mrs. Whitcomb's voice cracked. She took a deep breath, started again. "I laughed because it reminded me of being that child, the one with the wrong shoes, the hand-me-downs that never quite fit. My mother worked 3 jobs, and I swore I'd never be in that position again?" Janelle asked gently. Mrs. Whitcomb nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "But instead of having compassion, I became the very thing that hurt me. I need to make this right." Janelle pulled out a notepad. "I have a suggestion. A 3-part plan for restoration," she wrote as she spoke. "First, a public apology to Eli and Zoe. Second, your support for changing the uniform policy to be more inclusive. And third, regular volunteer hours at the uniform closet." "Yes, Mrs. Whitcomb said firmly. "To all of it, I want to help run the closet program, if they'll let me." The next morning, Pastor Ruth's church office buzzed with activity. She addressed envelopes containing town hall invitations, her reading glasses perched on her nose. The meeting would have to be held at the church, since Principal Hanlon had denied their request for the school auditorium, citing scheduling conflicts. Her assistant brought in another stack of RSVPs. The VFW hall called, "They're sending a delegation, and 3 more families want to share their uniform closet experiences." "Anonymously?" Pastor Ruth confirmed. "Yes. They wrote their stories down. Would you read them at the meeting?" "Of course." Pastor Ruth picked up another envelope, this one addressed to Charlotte Vale. Her hand hesitated over the stack of completed invitations. Charlie hadn't been seen at the warehouse since Eli asked her to step back, but this wasn't about one person or one incident anymore. At the VFW hall, Manny worked the phones with military precision. "Johnson, you'll drive Peters and Rodriguez. Martinez has the evening shift covered so Williams can attend." He checked names off a list, coordinating transportation for veterans who wanted to show support. "This isn't just about uniforms," he told his fellow vets. "It's about dignity, about standing up for our own." Many of them had children or grandchildren in the school system. They understood the stakes. Parents who had benefited from the uniform closet met quietly in the church basement, writing their experiences on plain paper. No names, just truth. "My daughter stopped crying before school. The seamstress treated us like any other family. For the first time, my son felt like he belonged." Pastor Ruth would give their words voice, protecting their privacy while ensuring their stories were heard. In her den that evening, Charlie sat in her father's old leather chair. The metal case lay open on her desk, brass and ribbons gleaming in the lamplight. Her fingers traced the Marine Corps insignia, remembering. She had been 12 when her father lost his job. The food pantry line seemed endless that winter. But he'd stood straight-backed, teaching her that dignity wasn't about what you had, but how you carried yourself. You help quietly, he'd always said, polishing his medals on Sunday nights. And you stand visibly when it costs you. The memory of his voice was so clear she could almost hear it in the quiet room. The invitation to tomorrow's town hall sat unopened on her desk. Eli's words echoed too, "My daughter is not your project." He'd been right. This was about more than one child or one donation. It was about changing a system that shamed children for their parents' circumstances. Charlie lifted her father's Distinguished Service Medal, remembering how he'd worn it only once after retiring, the day he stood up at a city council meeting to defend the food pantry's funding. It had cost him some business connections, but he'd never regretted it. She set the medal back in its velvet lining and closed the case with a quiet click. Her father's words settled into her heart like a compass, finding true north. Tomorrow would be about standing visibly, whatever the cost. Across town, Janelle compiled statistics about uniform costs and family incomes. Pastor Ruth sorted through anonymous testimonies. Manny confirmed the veterans' attendance plans. Mrs. Whitcomb drafted and redrafted her apology. Each person moved in their own orbit, preparing for tomorrow's convergence. The church bells tolled 9 times, their sound carrying across Riverbend's quiet streets. Charlie stood and placed her father's medal case back on its shelf, her decision made. Some forms of courage were quiet, like helping strangers without recognition. But sometimes courage meant standing up and being counted, letting your voice join others in calling for change. She turned off the den light, leaving tomorrow's invitation illuminated by moonlight on her desk. Behind her, the medals gleamed faintly in the darkness, silent witnesses to lessons learned long ago about dignity, service, and standing firm when it mattered most. Note: I've stopped here as we've covered all the required beats. Janelle's restorative plan with Mrs. Whitcomb's agreement, Pastor Ruth organizing the town hall, Manny mobilizing veterans, parents providing testimonies, and Charlie's evening scene with her father's medals ending exactly as specified. The narrative maintains focus on the present events without foreshadowing. The church hall hummed with anticipation as people filed in, filling the wooden pews and overflow chairs. Veterans in pressed uniforms sat together near the front, their presence lending gravity to the gathering. Parents clutched papers in their laps, some holding hands with their children. The overhead lights cast a warm glow on the familiar space, now transformed into an impromptu town forum. Pastor Ruth stepped to the podium, her silver hair catching the light. She adjusted the microphone with practiced ease, her voice carrying clear and firm through the sound system. Welcome, everyone. Before we begin, let's establish our ground rules. She looked across the assembled faces. This is a space of respect. We will not shame anyone. We will not use slurs or hostile language. Everyone who wishes to speak will be heard. She paused, letting the words settle. We're here to build bridges, not walls. The room nodded collectively, the atmosphere shifting from tension to attentive calm. Janelle Brooks approached the podium next, carrying a folder of collected testimonies. Her professional demeanor softened as she began to read. The day my son received his properly fitted uniform, she read, he stood taller. For the first time, I could send him to school with his head held high. She turned the page. My daughter stopped hiding in the bathroom before class. She finally feels like she belongs. More stories followed, each one striking a chord. Parents dabbed at their eyes. Even those who had never struggled with uniform costs found themselves moved by the simple dignity these families sought. The room grew quieter, more contemplative, as Mrs. Whitcomb rose from her seat. Her steps to the microphone were measured, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped a piece of paper. I owe an apology, she began, her voice wavering before finding strength. To Eli Turner and his daughter Zoe. She turned to face them directly in the third row. I laughed at your request for time to afford a uniform. That laughter came from my own unresolved shame, but it caused real harm to a child and her father. She swallowed hard, continuing, I forgot what it felt like to be that child, the one who didn't have the right clothes, whose mother needed more time to pay. I became what I once feared, and I am deeply sorry. Taking a steadying breath, Mrs. Whitcomb pulled out Zoe's essay. Zoe wrote something profound in her compassion essay. With her permission, I'd like to read an excerpt. We wear courage, not cloth. Our real uniform is the kindness we show each other. The applause started softly, then swelled, washing through the church hall like a cleansing wave. When Charlie Vale stood, she wasn't wearing a business suit or designer clothes, but the same simple cardigan she'd worn that first day in the school hallway. She walked to the podium without ceremony. Most of you know me now as a businesswoman, she began, but I'm here tonight as a Marine's daughter. She touched the medal pinned to her cardigan. This was my father's. He earned it serving his country, but his greatest lesson to me came years later when he lost his job. The room stilled, listening. I was 12 when we stood in the food pantry line. Dad wore his best shirt, held his head high, and taught me that dignity isn't about what you have, it's about how you treat others and yourself. Charlie outlined the endowment offer, her voice clear and steady. This fund will support the uniform closet and related programs, but with one absolute condition. It must be governed by the community. The board will include veterans, teachers, parents, including Eli Turner, and church representatives. No single person or institution should control access to dignity. Principal Hanlon had slipped in during Charlie's speech, standing at the back of the hall. As the applause faded, he made his way to the front, his usual confidence notably diminished. In light of recent events and community input, he said, clearing his throat, the no exceptions policy will be immediately reversed. He paused as murmurs rippled through the crowd. A new Dignity First policy will be drafted with community input. And, he straightened his tie, I am announcing my resignation, effective at the end of this semester. The announcement landed like a stone in still water, ripples of whispered reaction spreading through the pews. As the meeting concluded, people lingered in small groups, talking quietly. The cool night breeze carried the scent of approaching autumn as attendees spilled out onto the church steps. Under the porch light, Mrs. Whitcomb and Eli found themselves face to face. Eli extended his hand. Thank you, he said simply, for making it right. Mrs. Whitcomb clasped his hand, nodding, unable to speak through her emotion. As she moved away, Charlie approached. The night air stirred her cardigan, and the Marine Corps medal gleamed dully in the lamplight. Eli turned to face her, his posture relaxed for the first time in days. I spoke from hurt, he said, his voice steady and clear. Thank you for standing up anyway. Charlie's eyes were warm with understanding. Thank you for letting me stand, she replied quietly. They shook hands, a gesture of mutual respect under the autumn stars, while behind them the church door remained open, welcoming all who might need it in the days to come. At the spring fair, the church grounds buzzed with activity. Colorful booths dotted the lawn, and the afternoon sun cast long, warm shadows across families milling about with cotton candy and lemonade. The centerpiece was the makeshift stage where the kindness catwalk would soon begin. At the uniform closet booth, Mrs. Whitcomb knelt beside a young boy, carefully marking the hem of his new school pants. Her measuring tape hung around her neck like a badge of office, and her apron pockets bulged with pins and chalk. Gone was the brittle defensiveness of months past. In its place was a gentle attention to each child who approached. There you go, sweetie, she said, standing up with a warm smile. Come back Tuesday after school, and these will be ready for you. The boy's mother mouthed a silent, thank you, as they moved on to the next booth. Eli stood at his coordinator's desk, a position that still felt new but right. His clipboard held neat rows of sizes and names, real names now, not anonymous numbers. The Dignity First policy meant families could walk in the front door without shame. "Mr. Turner," a girl called out, wheeling her bike toward the tune-up station. "The brakes are squeaking again." "Head on over to Mr. Manny," Eli replied, gesturing to where Manny and two other retired veterans were working on bikes. "He'll fix you up." The tune-up booth rang with the sound of tools and laughter. Every few minutes, another child would test their newly repaired bike, the cheerful ding of bells punctuating the fair's atmosphere. Manny wiped his hands on a rag, his gruff exterior softened by the obvious pride he took in each repair. Near the stage, Zoe organized her note cards, preparing to host the catwalk. Her confidence had grown in these past weeks, nurtured by the community that had risen to defend her. She wore her uniform with ease now, accessorized with a small bird pin she'd designed herself. "Testing, testing," she spoke into the microphone, her voice carrying across the grounds. "Welcome to our first Kindness Catwalk. Today, our models will share what kindness looks like to them." The crowd gathered, settling onto hay bales and folding chairs. One by one, students walked the catwalk, each wearing clothes from the uniform closet. Instead of designer names, they announced acts of kindness they'd witnessed or performed. "Kindness is sharing your lunch when someone forgets theirs," announced a sixth grader, strutting with exaggerated flair that made everyone laugh. "Kindness is fixing a flat tire on someone's bike," declared another, ringing their bell for emphasis. Mrs. Whitcomb watched from the side, dabbing at her eyes with her apron. Zoe descended from the stage and approached her, holding something small and shiny. "Mrs. Whitcomb?" Zoe's voice was clear and strong. "This is for you." She pinned a bird badge to Mrs. Whitcomb's cardigan. The crowd erupted in applause, understanding the weight of the moment. Ms. Alvarez from CPS arrived quietly during the show, standing at the back of the crowd. After the final walk, she made her way to Eli, her professional demeanor warmed by a genuine smile. "Quite a production," she said, watching Zoe thank the participants. "She's really found her voice." Eli nodded, pride evident in his expression. "I have something for you, Ms. A." Alvarez continued, pulling an envelope from her bag. "Official closure of the case, with commendation. You've built something remarkable here, Mr. Turner." Charlie sat on a hay bale near the lemonade stand, content to observe. She'd declined 3 different offers to speak, instead watching with quiet satisfaction as the community celebrated itself. Pastor Ruth found her there, 2 cups of lemonade in hand. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Pastor Ruth said, offering Charlie a drink. She turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying natural authority. "If we could bow our heads for a moment?" The fairgoers stilled, heads bowing in respect. "Lord, we thank you for teaching us that dignity is not a gift to be granted but a right to be protected. Thank you for showing us that we are stronger together, that every person here bears your image, and that true community means sharing both our struggles and our victories. Help us continue to walk in grace and responsibility toward one another." "Amen. Amen," the crowd echoed. As the golden hour approached, families began packing up their bikes and belongings. Volunteers folded chairs and dismantled booths, calling cheerful goodbyes across the lawn. Zoe gathered her art supplies and walked purposefully to the church's heavy wooden doors. With careful movements, she taped a new drawing in place. The paper caught the late afternoon light, illuminating 2 birds, one brown, one white, sharing a single wing. Below, in her neat handwriting, she'd written simply, "Same wing." Eli and Charlie found themselves sharing a bench nearby, watching as the last rays of sun painted the church steps in warm gold. Neither felt the need to fill the comfortable silence with words. They weren't a romance, they were something else, something born of crisis and commitment, something like family found in unexpected places. "We're all right," Eli said finally, his voice carrying quiet certainty. The church bells began to ring, their deep tones rolling across the grounds. Children's laughter floated up from the bike racks, where Manny was showing a last-minute repair. Parents called goodbyes, car doors thumped shut, and the town, their town, settled into the peace of a community that had chosen to stand together. If you enjoyed the story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.